Brothers, sisters, friends, enemies, and for that matter, anything born of a man and a woman, I'm here again, and it's time for this train to get to rolling. I have often mentioned the value that I place on reading, and that's because I bring my mind in contact with other great minds when I pick the right things to read. It would be foolish for me to try to independently rediscover things that have been discovered. It would be a rediscovery for me, but not in reality and objectively speaking. The common expression for that is no need to reinvent the wheel. That brings me to my approach today. I'm going to talk about Cyrus the virus. And when others have given their opinions and expressed thoughts, there's no need for me to try to paraphrase or duplicate the things that they have already given their minds to and produced what I consider to be sound conclusions. So what I did do was to write a rhyme. I do this because it's therapeutic and I love words. And when you write a rhyme, all a poem is, when you get away from the deep stuff that nobody understands and few people like and children can't really grasp, metered rhyme or rhythmic rhyme can be a definition of poetry, but I call mine rhymes. This is titled Musings on Reinventing the Wheel, etc. I start by providing two definitions. One defines the word skeptic, and this comes from the American Heritage Dictionary. One who instinctively or habitually doubts, questions, or disagrees with assertions or generally accepted conclusions. Then the word perfect, lacking nothing essential to the whole, complete of its nature or kind, in a state of undiminished or highest excellence, without defect, flawless. Keep that in mind when I hit these words. He was a skeptic and flaunted it about. Naught did he accept unless he checked it out. Still, when great wisdom his words were displaying, they comprised a Bible verse, a lyric, or a saying. Indisputably, he had no peer when quoting. Equally peerless, he was whenever gloating. The wheel he reinvented, though already there. Success, he exclaimed, but his invention was a square. His great invention with pride filled his soul, but it had a drawback. It could not roll. Rolling, of course, was the essence of the wheel. Without that essence, the verdict was no deal. When the dawn broke, his mouth fell agape. All he'd reinvented was a geometric shape. Though a faux, F-A-U-X, which is a false or fake, though a faux skeptic, he truly was not dense. To see his bungle, he had sufficient sense. From that day forward, he always paused to see. If wisdom cautioned, let it be, let it be. The lesson he gleaned, cutting to the bone, quote, some things that are better left alone. All the truly wise by this fact are moved. That which is perfect cannot be improved. More perfect union, though in the Constitution, can be disregarded. That's poor syntax execution. More perfect says the best can be made better, which makes as little sense as making water wetter. Those founding fathers countenance gross knavery, yapping of freedom while practicing human slavery. When they can douse morality's pure light, 'tis a simple thing to not get grammar right. Truth from error, the wise are ever screening. The cardinal principle The cardinal principle is this: words indeed have meaning. So I will be using others' words a bit today, but I have another rhyme that introduces me to my subject, and I've read it before, and I'll read it again, and perhaps again. It's called Ode to COVID-19. Cyrus the virus, extremely desirous of raging like uncontrolled fire. Cyrus the virus did pen on Pyrrhus, would that all humans expire. Cyrus the virus does not admire us. If it could have its own way, it would inspire us, then would require us by recklessness ourselves to slay. Osiris the virus, forget not King Pyrrhus, who dealt the Romans what for? A victory he won, but when all was done, King Pyrrhus lost the war. Cyrus the virus, the fate of King Pyrrhus awaits you if man but relents. Your days are numbered when minds unencumbered embrace medical science and sense. I don't know whether Cyrus the virus will ever be totally eradicated, but if you pay attention to the findings of science and medical experimentation, testing, and so forth, you can at least hold Cyrus at bay. There is this container of hand sanitizer. It's a thick gel. You probably can't see it, but there are bubbles suspended in it, perfectly round. And obviously they're bubbles of air. If I shake it, they will all move as the gel moves, but they don't shift or change their position with reference to each other. Each remains the same distance from every other bubble that it had. No matter how you shift it, the entire gel mass will move and everything moves in it, which is imprisoned in it. So if people would follow science, there's the possibility of encasing Cyrus so that he is limited in what he can do. He'll be there waiting for something to either dilute that gel or create a passageway out. But if that's not done, Cyrus is imprisoned. There are safeguards: the mask, the social distancing, frequent washing of your hands, and other things that those who know more about these things than I will ever know or could ever learn in the amount of time that I have in this world with the small amount of knowledge of that variety that I have in my brain. There are people who, for political reasons, will disregard the findings of science. If they don't like somebody, they reject everything that somebody has to say. I'm smarter than most people. I listen to those I have conflict with. Everybody, on occasion, will say something that makes sense. So I listen to everybody, and I may be fortunate enough when that one pearl of wisdom, that one gem of great value and price will fall from the lips of that one I don't like, and my ear will pick it up, and my education has been improved. I have been enlightened. My mind has been enriched, and I no longer am or ever could be again what I had been before I obtained that bit of knowledge. You could never persuade me to dislike any person to such an extent that I would disregard everything that person says. That person has a brain. That brain generates thoughts. They may be misguided. They may be hateful, but not every thought is going to be misguided. And it's for us to sift through all of the earth as if we were panning for gold. Let the dirt fall through and hope that the nuggets of gold will be large enough not to fall through the hole. And you've enriched yourself. I would not say that Donald Trump, as much contempt as I have for him, will cause me, if we meet each other on the sidewalk, to jump off into the mud just so I won't rub elbows with Donald Trump. Trump was a misleader. He was a liar. It might be shown through this investigation by the Attorney General of New York that he is bordering on theft, misrepresentation, overstating the value of property that he possessed or pretended to possess to obtain loans fraudulently, all such things as that. But sometimes that which one person does to try to ensnare another will ensnare the would-be ensnarer. Trump had talked about Cyrus, the virus, being just like the flu, and one day it would magically disappear. He downgraded and downplayed the necessity to wear masks. He ridiculed now President Biden when he came to debate or whenever he appeared in public or in an enclosed place. He said, that guy's got the biggest mask you can find. But Cyrus hit Trump. But Trump, unlike most of you out there, unlike all of us out here, was able to obtain the best medical care available at the Walter Reed Army Hospital. They were able to pump oxygen into his poorly functioning lungs because they couldn't do the job. They had some experimental medications that might do some good. And when all of this was put together, they restored him to health. You don't have that luxury. And some of you who will avoid the vaccination and will become infected are going to be the cause of some others dying. Maybe they're having a heart attack, maybe a stroke, the kinds of things that ordinarily would allow them to enter one of those intensive care units. But because so many beds are being occupied by people who were reckless, not only when it came to their own welfare, but to the welfare of others, including family members, which could range from the elderly, such as myself, 85 years old, or infants, totally innocent, left to the care of people that should be trusted. So those who are the carriers are cruel, they are mindless, they are thoughtless. But the problem is, unlike cancer, it won't just kill them, they will be able to spread it to other unwitting people. So Donald Trump is the subject of this paragraph. Former President Donald Trump, oh, and it was in the World Herald on December 21st. Former President Donald Trump revealed he received a booster shot of the COVID-19 vaccine, drawing boos from a crowd in Dallas on Sunday night during the final stop of, quote, the history tour, unquote, a live interview show Trump has been doing with Bill Riley. So those very people that he had encouraged to ridicule the vaccination and all of the precautions booed him when he acknowledged that he got sense from somewhere, maybe Manila, or whatever her name is, or Ivanka told him, Daddy, get a vaccination. But at any rate, he did for himself what he had told others to not pay attention to. The following day on Fox News, this is an article that appeared December 22nd, the day after this one I just read. Fox News defended Jesse Waters on Tuesday after he used the phrase kill shot in a speech urging young conservatives to confront Dr. Anthony Fauci in public with a hostile interview. Fauci asked about it on CNN, said that Walters should be fired on the spot, but predicted he wouldn't be held accountable for his language, and he was not. When Fauci spoke to a congressional committee, it was a Senate committee, there's a guy named Rand Paul, who is a doctor, but he's a fool. And Fauci, not being a coward, unintimidated by Paul, as many people are, confronted him and called him out, mentioned how wrong he was, how he had encouraged people to kill, threaten the life of Dr. Fauci. He said, myself, and they are harassing my family. The crazies out there are taking your words and running with them. Then he mentioned things that Rand Paul has on his website, because Paul, being dishonest, was going to lie about the very things he had said. Fauci mentioned that Rand Paul uses his seat in the Senate to fundraise at hearings such as was going on at that point. Paul wanted to deny it, but Fauci held up an example which showed Rand Paul's website saying $1, $10, or whatever the amount was to oppose Dr. Fauci. And Fauci pointed out that this very moment, with what he is doing, he is fundraising politically. That's what the fools will do to make fools out of you fools who believe them. You can believe that Rand Paul, who is a doctor, understands something about viruses, epidemiology, is going to get his shots, his vaccination, and he may deny it. But he is not going to do what he tells you all to do. What he wants is your money and your vote, and he wants you to remain stupid. Hitler pointed out that if you want to be successful in reaching the masses of people, you have to gear what you say to the least intelligent among them. And people will more readily believe the big lie than the small one. And another person had described the public as being like a horse, bridled, saddled, and waiting to be ridden. And the tyrant is spurred and booted and ready to ride them. That's what Trump has done. It's what these other politicians are doing. And I'm one who has never worn a party label. I don't belong to organizations. I don't go to church. I don't do anything that would make it appear that I have a party line that I'm following. If a Republican says something that makes sense, I don't benefit myself by rejecting it just because a Republican said it. If a Democrat says something that's stupid, I'm not going to make myself stupid by trying to justify what he or she said. I don't know and cannot explain every element in the human body, every corpuscle in my body, there are probably viruses I'm carrying, every bacterium, but I'll tell you this, because I don't know, I was smart enough to take the mantra of another person who did not know any more than I know, and maybe not as much, but he knew how to express whatever it is he is. And that's Popeye the Sailor Man. I am what I am, and that's all that I am. So whatever I consist of, whatever composes me is what I am, and that's exactly what I am. So what I intend to do, I've read my part about Cyrus the Virus, and I'll have something else that I wrote that I will read. But the first thing I want to do is read a comment from a lady named Courtney Allen Gentry, who is described as a community columnist who is given a periodic space in the World Herald. It describes her as an RN with a master's in nursing, is a board certified advanced holistic nurse, nurse educator, and coach specializing in the integration of science, spirit, and plant medicine into public health. In other words, a medicine woman, not a shaman, maybe a shay woman, but anyway. This appeared in November of this year as a nurse and public health. By the way, I'm very proud of the fact that not through any choice of or plan of mine that I share DNA with this woman. I share racial heritage with this woman. And she is an example of the level to which we all can rise, notwithstanding the many attempts throughout history by white people to portray us as ignorant and inferior to them. But what amazes me is that whenever Black people are given a chance, they excel and exceed white people. They wouldn't let Black people play baseball with white people, but Black people played baseball among themselves. And when Jackie Robinson came, he did things that had never been done before. Jackie Robinson stole home. That doesn't mean he went and took the plate out of the ground when nobody was looking at it, put it under his arm and went home with it, as white people would say he did. That meant that between the time the pitcher either wound up or took his stretch and let that ball go, Jackie Robinson timed his moves to such an extent that he got to that plate before the ball did. And if the catcher got it, Jackie would slide under the catcher and they'd say save. Never had anything like that been seen before. So there was Jackie Robinson. Branch Rickey had told him that these insults are going to be hurled at you. He knew how racist these white people were. He knows his people. And these so-called anti-critical race theory people are yapping about is their attempt to take from history, to expunge those horrible things white people did and diminish the significance of what Black people did. Now, look at the racial makeup of baseball, basketball, football, where they wouldn't let us in. The position of quarterback, where they said we could not function. The position on defense of middle linebacker. Look at the ones who hold those positions now. Alabama, where they didn't even want to let us go to school. And you all know the famous pronouncement of George Wallace, the racist whose philosophy has prevailed and is animating American politics now, stood in the doorway. George Wallace knew this: if we let Black people into these universities, they're going to take what we've got and outdo us with this, as they have in every other thing where we've given them slack. Nobody like me was ever seen in the legislature before. Nobody ever used the rules which they wrote in the way that I used them. Nobody functioned always within the rules and did more within the rules than they could do within or outside the rules. One man, but George Wallace, backed by the Alabama National Guard, when these two young Black people were going to enter the halls of ivy, so to speak, not with bombs, not with guns, but to improve their minds, to get the tools that would help them, to help this society become what it lyingly professed to be. One where not just the words are stated, all persons are created equal, but to make that statement a reality in the form of a guiding principle. Let a person's ability, regardless of race, religion, sexual orientation, height, weight, or any other external characteristic go as far as what's in the mind, in the heart, of which I have none, the spirit will carry them. Wallace knew that because he didn't have those things. And he was what you would call an anti-intellectual. And you know what he's famous for? One day I was speaking on the floor of the legislature and I was talking about George Wallace. And I quoted him, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And there was a state trooper on duty, a black man. And he said when he heard that, he stopped in his tracks because he thought somebody was playing a recording of George Wallace on the floor of the Nebraska legislature. Then he found out it was me and the context in which I did it. That's what George Wallace said. But now, why was Alabama in the football game for the championship of all football? Why did Alabama win the championship in the admittedly toughest football league in the country, the Southeastern Conference known as the SEC? Because of the number of black people they had on offense and defense. Their quarterback won the Heisman Trophy. They have defensive players that have professional teams drooling and licking their chops to try to get them. And there are these white people who are sitting back, like Trump, like Ricketts, saying, we always warned you. Ricketts can say, my daddy warned you, but he made the mistake of putting his racism on his website, his anti-Muslim attitudes. And when it came out and old man Ricketts was condemned, young Ricketts said he didn't know his daddy was like that. Well, the nut doesn't fall far from the tree, and you can look at the racism of Ricketts now, and you know it was a family affair. Ricketts and his ilk stated, if we let them in, at first they will trickle, just a few, and then they'll flood like the Nile and they'll wash everything away. Everything that we've given our lives to, building dams, dikes, trenches, walls to keep them out, because we know that they're superior. And you might say, now, why is this black man who wants to talk about equality talking about superiority? I'm talking about facts, ma'am, just the facts. When a group of people can be kidnapped from their homeland, have their religion taken from them, any cultural remnants destroyed, be empty vessels, and do what black people have done, when white people who have been free all of their life cannot equal black people in a fair up and down fight. Not every black man will outdo every white man. That's not what I'm saying. I'm dealing with it like white people, where they deal in masses. Black people as a whole are superior to white people as a whole. When that was put to Malcolm X by some students at Harvard, Malcolm said, well, I'm not a geneticist, but I've read a little bit, and your eyes are blue. Black people's eyes, by and large, are brown. And they say that the genes that form your eyes are what they call recessive or weak genes. The genes that give you your complexion are recessive. And if you have an admixture of black, then it affects you more than what you have will affect us. So if you want to talk at that simple-minded level, we will outdo you in that too. So why waste time fighting? It's not a cause that's lost. It's a cause that never was, never should have been. Why cannot you look at somebody else and accord to them what you would like to have accorded to you? That's why I was a hero to a lot of white people in this state, because they came to me when they couldn't go to white senators and get anything. My name would make white officials tremble when white senators' names would make them laugh. Not because I was born superior to anybody, but if I was, it's due to my mother and father, not me. I would not have had anything to do with it. I would have been the inheritor, the receiver of something good that if I'm smart enough, I can make use of. But I did not create myself. What I am, I can help sharpen and improve by reading, studying, developing my mind. But anybody who had a problem where they were being denied rights under the law they were entitled to, believe it or not, I've even come to the aid of cops, not as a cop, but as a person who, under the circumstances brought to me, was not being treated fairly. And I'd let him know or her know. You know what my attitude is about cops? They say, well, I know because I am one and I know what cops do. I say, well, why won't you say anything? And in one form or another, they'd say, well, you've heard of the blue wall. Well, I'm a brick in that blue wall. I said, oh, and I like to show them that I'm aware of their music. I said, like Pink Floyd, and their eyes come open. I say, all we are is just another brick in the wall. And then I even know a few of the words. We don't need no education. Mm-mm-mm. We don't need no thought control. Mm-mm-mm. No dark sarcasms in the classroom. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm. Hey, teacher, leave them kids alone. I listen to you all's music. I listen to the words. And people who write music, who write lyrics, often write above the head of those who are going to listen. But those lyricists, musicians, know that there are going to be some people who will look below the surface and get the message that is sub rosa or beneath the surface, the thought behind the words, the thoughts that are between the lines, as well as the thoughts that are on the line. Now to read from my sister, not sister because we have the same parents, but the same heritage. As a nurse and public health advocate, I took an oath to do no harm, but today across the country, firefighters, police, doctors, and nurses refuse to get vaccinated, even though professional vaccine mandates have always been a regular part of working in public service. When did we stop caring for each other? The act of caring for another is considered the earliest sign of a civilized society, according to anthropologist Margaret Mead. Lecturing while holding a healed thigh bone above her head, she stated, "Here is what I believe to be evidence of the earliest true civilization. This healed bone shows that someone must have cared for this injured person, hunted on his behalf, brought him food, served him at personal sacrifice," unquote. Nursing a community member back to health, caring for and protecting vulnerable members of the group, all anthropological indicators of early civilization are foundational to modern public health practices at every level of society. The principles of public health, including mandatory inoculation, actually helped birth this nation. According to the publication, Smallpox Vaccination and Early Start of Modern Medicine in America, General George Washington's 1777 smallpox vaccine mandate reduced the Continental Army troop fatality rate from 60% to 1 to 2%. This critically important military strategy ensured the health of the troops while giving rise to military vaccine mandates that continue today. And if you don't think that's so, ask anybody who went to basic training like I did. They got people on both sides of you with needles. And if the right one don't get you, then the left one will. So when you jump from that one, you jump right into this one. Then you bounce off him and this one gets you. Yeah, the military makes you take these vaccinations and it's considered a matter of course, a part of the training, the requirement. Continuing, criticism of Washington was directly related to the fact that inoculation was a common African medicine technique imported to America by slaves. However, after English physician Edward Jenner found that milkmaids exposed to cowpox were protected against smallpox, the crude method of inserting infected pus from a smallpox patient into a small cut was replaced with a less dangerous cowpox vaccine. By 1800, Boston physician Benjamin Waterhouse, friend to Jenner, was able to convince the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, who was perhaps the harshest critic of medicine at the time, to introduce this more refined vaccination technology to the American public. The result was so effective, the new vaccination quickly gained popularity in the medical establishment. We go 13 years later, 1813. President James Madison signed an act to encourage vaccination, creating the U.S. Vaccine Agency and requiring the Postal Service to carry smallpox vaccine materials free of charge. Complete eradication of smallpox worldwide would take another 150 years. Yet this early American history at the intersection of medicine, public health, military strategy, and government agency laid the foundation for subsequent disease eradication programs around the globe when it came to smallpox. And smallpox, when it got you, it had you. And that's when that song came, "You really got a hold on me," and didn't let go. And then Marvin Gaye came along and forecast what these ignorant anti-vaxxers would say. Marvin Gaye said, "Believe half of what you see, son, and none of what you hear." And quiet as it's kept, Marvin Gaye used to play drums with Motown before he sang. And those young girls, they were the Marvelettes or Shirelles who sang "Mr. Postman, Check and See." Marvin Gaye played the drums on that song. I know a thing or two about a thing or two because I read, I listen, I pay attention to everybody and anybody who's got something to say that I think is worthwhile. Mary Alonzo was a great tenor. And one of the songs that he made famous was "Be My Love," and he sang it like nobody. Who would think that somebody who could use the legislative rules like I do and be called the racist names that I'm called, have threats on my life as my daily fare in the form of notes glued to my door, slipped under my door when nobody was there, sent to me in the mail. And you know how the post office would deliver it? They would put the N word before my name, Lincoln, Nebraska, and it was delivered to my office. But anyway, my friends, my enemies, my brothers, my sisters, the neutrals, a diamond properly cut has many facets. And when the light strikes it from this angle, you might see blue, yellow, red. It's like a prism. You pass a beam of light, which is colorless, through a prism, and it'll break that beam of light into the colors of the rainbow that'll be cast on that wall. I learned that in grade school and remembered it. Anyway, back to this. It took more than 150 years for smallpox to be eradicated globally. Based on this history, it is evident to this public health nurse that future generations will be dealing with COVID-19 for a long time before we get complete eradication, if at all. Meanwhile, COVID and its variants will become endemic to populations around the world. There's pandemic, epidemic, then endemic. The pandemic, pan means everything, universal, a panorama. Epidemic, epic. It covers a lot of territory, but it's localized, like to a country or a part of the globe. When it's endemic, then that means it's common, but it's not deadly. It's just one of the other ailments that will strike people. So COVID has to first cease being pandemic all over the world, become epidemic, where there are pockets of it where people don't take proper precautions or don't have the medical technology and know-how. Then endemic, where it's not all over the world. It's not even like that in large pockets, but it's one of the ailments that will afflict people like flu. So when they say it's endemic, the word can be an adjective even, and it's something that is common or found with something. Just thought I'd throw that in, a little bit of syntax properly utilized, but continue. Oh, and by the way, there are other coronaviruses, but to distinguish this one, the COVID-19 is one of those words that you make by putting letters together. COVID, the CO is for corona, the VI is for virus, the D is for disease, coronavirus disease, and the 19 is the year that it came, 1999. So now you know what COVID-19 stands for. A lot of things that just float around will have a meaning that most people don't stop to find out. Why should they? They don't need it. Everybody knows what that term means, even though they don't know what all of the parts of it mean. But let me continue. We are now employing nurses to staff our hospitals who are willing to put patients at risk due to political beliefs. This is evidence that caring as a paradigm of nursing is on the decline and a true indication of the decline of our civilized society. As a Black nurse leader, I refuse to work in an environment where healthcare workers are more concerned about their political beliefs than the populations we serve. Nor would I want to be a patient in a hospital where I'm at risk of getting a hospital-acquired infection from staff, believing their rights as an individual supersede the rights of a sane society. For the patients they serve, profess to serve, pretend to serve, purport to serve. Indeed, for people of color, this scenario presents the primary reason why I decided to risk my immunocompromised status to get the jab. In other words, to get the vaccination, protecting myself against the possibility of dying in hospital systems, courting unvaccinated hospital staff is the best way to take personal responsibility for my health as a Black woman. It was the intentional withholding of medical treatment for Black people in the Tuskegee studies where they infected people with syphilis, Black men, and then prevented them from being given medication. It was the intentional withholding of medical treatment from Black people in the Tuskegee studies that helped establish the legacy of government distrust and vaccine hesitancy in the Black community today. Today, though, Black people today have free access to life-sparing COVID-19 vaccine technology. We can take comfort that America's first vaccine technique was imported by African ancestors. And today's Moderna vaccine, which I got, was developed by Black immunologist Kizimekia Corbett. Thanks, Dr. Corbett. I feel I can take personal responsibility for my health with a trusted immunization. I am happy to continue my commitment for caring by modeling healthy behaviors that demonstrate care, and we could all use more care. Our civilization depends on it. Then, because I believe in practicing what I preach or preaching what I practice, and I've read this once before, but I put this in the World Herald, November 18th. Irresponsible anti-vax claims mislead Black Nebraskans. Frustration, thy name is COVID-19, AKA Cyrus the virus. Overwhelming is the frustration engendered by the flood of virus misinformation deluging the nation. Being Black, I am particularly perplexed and distressed by the volume of Black people among the deluded, COVID-denying, anti-vaxxer crowd. We are dying daily. During a weekly podcast called The Ernie Chambers Show, which this one is, regardless of my topic, I preliminarily vent my frustration with Black people who spurn vaccination. Between two people, one of whom speaks only English and the other only Greek, there can be no meaningful oral communication. When in Rome, due to the deference paid to religion by many in the Black community, I resort to a scripture-based appeal speaking their language, comprising a series of biblical verses. Jesus described you all, talking about my Black brothers and sisters, when he warned, they will not be persuaded though one rose from the dead, Luke 16:31. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall in the ditch, Matthew 15:14. Nevertheless, deeming myself to be my brothers and my sister's keeper, I forge onward, echoing prophet Jeremiah's anguished lament. Oh, that my head were waters and mine eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for my people. And this is followed by, quote, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, Hosea 4:16. A horse led to water cannot be forced to drink, and a fool led to school cannot be forced to think if the shoe fits. I'm reduced to the role of a sower who can merely cast seeds and must rely on other forces to determine if they take root and grow. However, not all is gloom and doom on the COVID front. Heartening is it to witness the enthusiasm of young children eager to get their shot. Continuing the scriptural theme, they may be viewed as the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy of hope. A little child shall lead them. Isaiah 11:16. May adults be led to heed them. Despite Ben Franklin's assertion that little strokes fell big oaks, if I had my druthers, I'd be dealing mighty strokes with the great axe of the legendary giant lumberjack Paul Bunyan against the twin oaks of COVID denial and anti-vaccination claptrap and trumpeting timber. And down they would crash, and we'd have a chance to survive. And here's an article. Now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to ask my director how many minutes I've got left. This is an article dated December 10th. It's one thing to preach and another thing to practice. There was this lady and she said, I've got two sons. If I could just put together what they each do, then each would be better off. The man said, what do you mean? She said, well, one of them's a minister and one of them's a doctor. He said, I don't get it. She said, well, the doctor practices and the minister preaches. So if they both would practice what they preach, put them together, each one of my sons would be on the road. But anyway, this is dated December 10th of this last year, and some of you may have seen it. COVID booster. After shot, Chambers pumps out 30 push-ups. And if I wanted to be boastful, I'd lay out on this table and do them. Former Nebraska State Senator Ernie Chambers pushed aside his signature short sleeve sweatshirt Thursday and flexed his arm before getting a booster dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. To show that he felt just fine after the jab, he dropped and gave the staff of Charles Drew Health Center 30 push-ups. Chambers, 84, said he wants to be an example to others, especially those in the Black community. Quote, I'm hoping that the people who may have some regard for me and what I recommend will see that I myself took 2 shots, took my booster, he said. They may be inclined to say, if he did it, then I think I'll give it a try also. Over the course of the pandemic, Chambers said, he has been a fairly regular guest on his daughter's podcast. He talks about misinformation surrounding COVID-19, which he has dubbed Cyrus the Virus. Chambers said he tries to relate things back to common Bible passages. When Chambers was at Charles Drew for his booster, he said, several people thanked him for what he was doing, but he was moved by an 11-year-old girl who he said was enthusiastic about receiving her vaccine. Chambers said he told the girl, quote, if I had not been of a mind to get a vaccine, but I saw somebody like you getting this, it would make me do it, unquote. Chambers said he had no side effects after either the first or second dose of the Moderna vaccine, no headaches or wooziness, and not even a bit of soreness at the vaccine site. And my booster obviously didn't bother me. After each of those doses, he did 25 push-ups. It's something of a signature move, he said, and it demonstrates that he's in good health, but still wants to take precautions. Chambers decided to show off Thursday by taking on an extra 5. That was met with oohs and ahs from those in the health center. The idea with COVID is that you can have the virus and be asymptomatic like typhoid Mary, he said. If you have family members or friends or circulate around other people, we should know that consideration. We should show it. And Johnny Rogers, then I'm going to be through. I'm just going to say something because Johnny talked about it in the newspaper. Because having COVID is not pleasant. I would not reveal somebody's medical condition if it had not been made public. And these things Johnny said. He talked about his condition and how with his strength and his conditioning, although he got a few extra pounds, if somebody was not in the shape he was in, they would not have survived in the way he did. He said he lost 30 or 40 pounds, that when they told him he had to go on the ventilator, he didn't want to do it because they'd have to sedate him. And he felt that he had to be conscious and awake to fight. And if he went to sleep, he couldn't fight. But he went on, they ventilated him. He's very weak now, has lost a lot of weight. His sister refers to him as the man with the little stick arms, but he is fighting. And he said he wants people to know that if it can hit and do to somebody like him what it in fact did to him, maybe they would listen and not be like him. He said he thought that the vaccine would put poison into his body. He saw from experience how wrong all that misinformation was. He's one of those who lived to tell it. He's hanging on to life, not by a thread, but with what we call in the barbershop, a 30-second death grip, and he's not going to let it go. And when he's restored completely to health, he may become an ambassador whose word will be taken when it comes to the need for that vaccination in the way that people respect his savvy when it comes to football due to the fact that he won that Heisman Trophy. And COVID, when it attacked him, see, Cyrus the Virus talks to you. He mocked Johnny. He said, "You think I wasn't aware of what you did on that football field? You think I wasn't aware of the conditioning that you went through to be able to do that? How you could shed tacklers, how you could evade those would-be tacklers, how you get into the open and outrun everybody? Here a little, there a little, then gone, like the will o' the wisp." Cyrus said, "I knew all that, but I did to you what they couldn't do on the football field. I tracked you down, I tackled you, and not only did I throw you for a loss, I temporarily took you out of the game. And but for blind good luck, I would have taken your life. See you later, alligator." And Johnny said, "Maybe so, Dynamo. Now go." So we will have from Johnny Rogers at various points along the way, I'm sure, descriptions of what he went through, how he could have avoided all of that, and how he's now willing to give time, hoping that he can lead others out of the darkness that he was in so they won't have to suffer what he suffered. They say experience is the best teacher, and some will have no other. There are people in graves now because the experience they got did not teach them. It ended their life. Some left infant children, some left teenagers, some left a wife, some left a husband, some left grandchildren. And these things are real. You can laugh at me, you can mock me, but you can't change reality. Cyrus, the virus, is desirous that all human beings expire. And he's doing all he can to make that happen. And he has a lot of handmaidens and male servants who are assisting. Misinformation, false information, and they see a political party line as being more important than the reality. This society can never heal itself when individuals will not do what they can do to heal their own individual bodies. And I've said enough, and I will sign off as I've become accustomed to doing. When the canary saw that the door to the cage was open, he said, "I'm out of here."
Thank you for watching The Ernie Chambers Show. If you'd like to make suggestions, email us at ewcfacts@gmail.com. That's ewcfacts@gmail.com. This has been an EWC Communication production.